Yo, what's going on everybody? It's your boy Naruto Explained here, bringing you guys another Boruto 2 Blue Vortex discussion. Today, I want to talk to you guys about something that stood out to me when I was reading chapter 11 of Boruto 2 Blue Vortex that I found to be interesting enough that when I decided to go read through the comments on the review itself, I saw a few people, they were getting close to this topic, but they were stopping short of going all the way there with it, which is the fact that we have Boruto here saving Sarada, and while everyone was freaking out on Sarada not using her Mangekyo Sharingan because she wasn't given a chance to in this fight, and Boruto stepping in to save her from being turned into a tree, there's something else that we need to take into consideration, which is the fact that Boruto and Sarada being in such a close proximity to each other might not be a good thing. And in today's newest Naruto Explained video, I wanted to explain to you why I think we at the very least have to have a conversation about the biggest danger of Boruto having saved Sarada. Now, just to be clear here, this is not going to be a video where I'm ranting and raving about Boruto saving Sarada. I'm not going to be making jokes about Sarada's Sakura genes going into full overdrive here or anything of that notion. I've already made my stance clear on the chapter review of why the character of Boruto needed it because of how it went back to what we saw in chapter 5 of Boruto 2 Blue Vortex and the samurai elements that build on the foundation of Boruto and Sasuke's relationship. So I'm not going to repeat that information in this video here. So why exactly do I think there's a danger with Boruto saving Sarada? What makes me say that? Well, it goes back to the fact that Boruto, over the span of 1, maybe 2 days at most, he's been shown engaging in several battles that you can argue have all been building up to this point. Day 1, for instance, assuming of course you think 2 days have passed, which you can make that argument for. During day 1, he was throwing down with Code, he was trashing the claw grinds, and he was fighting for his life against the awakened Shinju before Boruto left with Kashi and Koji from Sasuke's tree and went back to Orochimaru's hideout. On presumably day 2, we see Boruto mixing up with Mitsuki, albeit he was holding back severely, not trying to kill him, using just enough force to make Mitsuki realize the gap between the two and to make him bow down into submission. He then proceeded to leave the village and was shown looking down at his karma seal, clutching at his hand as if trying to stabilize it, because as we know, Momoshiki takes over his body when one of two things occur. Either Boruto gets too low on chakra or his mental state of mind is too weak to suppress Momoshiki due to the imbalance of yang chakra, which is what regulates spiritual energy. He then was shown freaking out when his karma began to activate, and Kawaki dropped the breadcrumb in our minds that Boruto can't control his karma seal just yet, which is something I stated in the video breaking down the symbolism of Boruto's broken sword, noting how Boruto showed no indication of having even attempted to use the karma seal in that battle with base Code and those claw grinds, which, reminder, it was base Code, not Code with the karma seal. So stop the disingenuous Sasuke scaling. However, he is now suddenly face to face with Hidari once again, and likely is going to have a very annoyed Jura coming after him in the future, assuming of course Kawaki doesn't show up and provide some meaningful method of entertainment to Jura long enough for Boruto to fight against Hidari without any interference. I lay all this out as a foundation, regardless as to if you think it's 1 day or 2 days, because we're in dangerous territory with Boruto and how much chakra he's expended, and the narrative has been hinting at him not being in full control of karma, and we haven't seen Momoshiki show up all, and Boruto just happens to be facing someone we know is pretty damn strong that's going to force Boruto to use a lot of effort based on Boruto's own warning to Code early on, where he tells him if those claw grinds awaken into those awakened Shinju, Code wouldn't have the power to annihilate them. Very direct language there. Boruto was then shown telling Code in chapter 4 to work with him or else the Shinju will kill him, which at the time it was only the bug Shinju who Boruto knew about when he made that statement, and Ada coming to the conclusion based on what she saw that these Shinju, they were in a different league than Code, and felt that they were strong enough that she needed to warn Kawaki of their power. This is so soon after Boruto was being shown spooked and the toad on his shoulder was expressing concern about Boruto's situation. It's all the ingredients for a potential return of Momoshiki to the story, someone who the narrative has purposely never directly mentioned in the story, outside of Sarada in chapter 1 saying that at first omnipotence When it was casted, Shikamaru was one of the people questioning why Momoshiki's chakra couldn't be sensed inside of Kawaki, but as we all know, omnipotence, it forced everyone to just accept the irregularities that they've been seeing and not question them any further. Momoshiki has been visibly absent despite the last time we saw him. He was fuming mad and screaming at Boruto after his plan to gaslight him into despair failed, and I don't think that this was made by mistake, especially considering look at what we know about why his plan failed. Everything that he had outlined was going just as planned before things suddenly weren't. Boruto was on the run, he was desperate, he was confused. His village was now hunting him down for things he didn't do, including the belief that he murdered his parents. His parents, they were gone, sealed away. The blue eyes that Momoshiki warned him about, Ada's blue eyes of the Semrigan, they had casted the omnipotence, and Boruto was getting pushed further and further into a corner, helpless and alone. Yet it was the one girl who was immune to the effects of omnipotence who was able to convince her father. Boruto's precious sensei Sasuke was seen swooping in to save Boruto right when Momoshiki was making his most aggressive push to make Boruto give up control of his body, but Sasuke stepped in and stopped it before it could get to that point. Boruto's karma was spreading against his will. Momoshiki was dangerously close at this point. Momoshiki's words to himself, they were fuming once he found the time to digest everything that had happened, saying that he couldn't believe that Sasuke was even possibly in his right mind, because something like this, it shouldn't have been possible due to how omnipotence works, because omnipotence does not act like a genjutsu. Once you know that your memory's been altered, it doesn't just reverse, the effects stay in place. Whereas with genjutsu, when you realize you're in a genjutsu, you can break out of it. Momoshiki couldn't believe that Sasuke was helping Boruto, even though his mind believes that Boruto is an enemy, and he looked beyond pissed that it was Sarada who got Sasuke to save Boruto. The presence of Sasuke there and the knowledge that Sarada was looking out for him, it was what gave Boruto's mental state of mind just what it needed to strengthen and rally against Momoshiki. Since that moment took place, Momoshiki, he's been hiding in the bushes like a goon, watching as Boruto went through the trauma of losing his sensei, Sasuke, and has been carrying around that burden of protecting Sarada for Sasuke as a part of Sasuke's last words before he was defeated. And now Boruto is arriving right when Sarada has been incapacitated and was on the verge of joining Sasuke as a tree, and Boruto is fresh off struggling to contain Momoshiki. These are all the ingredients of a Momoshiki hijacking moment, and if it comes to this, I'd like to make the argument that Sarada is going to be one of Momoshiki's targets, because he is petty enough of a character to still have held on to a grudge that he was going to get back at Sarada because she's the one who derailed his plans, indirectly by sending Sasuke to Boruto. And hell, we can even say that this wasn't even indirectly, because there's a direct correlation to Momoshiki's plan blowing up in his face due to Sarada. He's enough of a goon to go after Sarada when she's apparently her most helpless, and it's why that from a narrative perspective, it's something that is super rich and has a rich weight to it, and allow me to explain what I mean. So when you look at this from a craft perspective, so as a writer, you always want to position your characters in a spot where their internal conflict is being brushed up against an external conflict. You want two things building up to a point where they're the narrative ingredients that you need to start a fire, the same way that, say, an arsonist looks for the right ingredients to put into a paper bag with a light bulb in order to start the fire that burns down a building. When your character's internal conflict reaches a boiling point, you introduce an external threat that directly positions itself in some way that makes the main character uncomfortable or challenges their perception of a fear or an insecurity that they have, and the two, they begin to play off of one another, picking up more heat as the story moves along until it gets resolved. For Boruto, that internal conflict is his desire to protect Sasuke's legacy in Sarada and defeat Hidari, where the story has alluded to there being a way to save Sasuke that is connected to the Ten Tails, potentially Hidari himself. And for Boruto, Sarada is that internal conflict and a physical representation and a reminder of the weight that he carries around as a result. He's someone who has already lost so much, and in this post-omnipotence world, Sarada has been that anchor that's held him down from the very moment that it was casted. She threw down the anchor in place and she sent the lifeboat known as Sasuke to go out to save Boruto. The other internal conflict is how Boruto was struggling to contain Momoshiki and removing himself from the area until he had his karma seal back under control. You saw visible fear and panic there on both Boruto and the Toad. It's almost like a bridge to connect Boruto's past trauma of the karma and everything he's done with Momoshiki hijack to the current events of the story. The external conflict comes from Boruto losing control to Momoshiki if the fight pushes him to using more of his chakra than wanted. And as we've seen, when his chakra drops below a certain point, Momoshiki can hijack, which that's still a problem for Boruto. Even after Momoshiki restored Boruto back to life, gotta throw this next part out here because anytime I don't explain why that's the case, there's usually someone in the comment section who writes they don't understand how Momoshiki can hijack his body. They say that I misread everything. Momoshiki lost the ability to resurrect himself using Boruto's body. Resurrect as in what Ishiki did when Jigen died. You saw Ishiki in the flesh. Momoshiki can't do that anymore. But as Amato stated, the threat of Momoshiki hijacking Boruto's body, it still exists. But Boruto refused the Byakugan drugs because he wanted to attempt to control Momoshiki himself without any additional help. I think that's something that could pose a threat for Boruto, and it will be a hell of an introduction for Momoshiki into this story. While I'm not 100% sure that this is how everything plays out, I do believe there are some red herrings that are sprinkled into the story. I do strongly believe though that it's enough of a threat to warrant a conversation with us as a community, because Momoshiki never popping up so far and going unmentioned outside of Sarada's words in the first chapter, this just feels like it's leading somewhere. While it's likely that there's some larger planet play for Momoshiki that subverts expectations, I think you have something more to work with here, because Momoshiki popping up and endangering Sarada so soon after Kawaki stated that Boruto can't control his karma, it just adds another layer to Kawaki in his justification to want to kill Boruto. And we just happen to have Konohamaru there, still conscious on the battlefield, ready to bear witness. Things can get super messy if we take this approach and make chapter 11 a much bigger chapter in hindsight, which you can watch the chapter review by clicking over here on the left, or you can watch my new Kaiju number 8 video essay on Kikuro Shinomiya, my personal favorite character of that series and one of my top 3 female new gen characters. And I don't say that lightly. Beautiful character arc.